Roblox.
For life, there's Roblox.
It's a game that needs no introduction. You know it, I know it, and most likely you've played it at one point in your life. I've played Roblox off and on for about a decade now, though of course, now that I'm a grown-ass man, I don't really play it much. When I do play it, it's usually just to play some of the absolute peak the site has to offer. There are millions of games on Roblox, some good, some bad, but something that's shared between all of them is that they're meant for kids, or at the very least, an underage audience. Well, that and they want your money. However, Roblox being as kid-friendly as it is, has had me wondering, are there any horror games on Roblox? Okay, obviously the answer is yes, but are there any good horror games on Roblox? And are there any that are even remotely scary? We've seen with Lethal Company that Roblox developers can go on to make great horror games, so there's gotta be at least a few good horror games, right? To answer this question, I've picked out a handful of Roblox horror games, ranging from some of the most popular to some my friends had suggested to me. This is by no means a comprehensive list, and I've probably missed some good games. So please, feel free to let me know how terrifying Ferb.exerp is in the comments. Before we get into the first game, if you end up enjoying this video, please do leave a like and subscribe, as it really helps me out. With all that said, let's get into the first game. First, I'm going to quickly talk about arguably the most popular Roblox horror game, Doors. Now, I never actually played Doors before starting work on this video, so I was curious if it would manage to live up to the hype. I'll get more into it later, but yeah, I think it definitely lived up to the hype. Starting the game, the first room serves as a tutorial where we learn we can crouch and pick up items, which we'll need to do to unlock some rooms later. This brings me to the rest of the game, which is actually a roguelite where you need to go through 100 randomly generated rooms without dying. If that sounds at all familiar, it's because this game takes heavy inspiration from the game Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion, though the games are fundamentally very different. Unlike Spooky's, Doors is a lot more lighthearted, and it's definitely aimed at a younger audience. Yes, there's jump scares, monsters, and an overall spooky atmosphere, but that's really all there is making this a horror game. I could imagine that if you played this game multiplayer, especially with friends, it'd be a much different experience. Likely one that's not even remotely scary. However, that's not at all a bad thing. This is a bit of a spoiler for the rest of the video, but I think Roblox horror games do much better when they lean into being a bit silly, and I would much rather they focus on being fun rather than being scary. I mean, come on, it's Roblox. You'd have to really try to somehow make this scary. We'll talk more about that later though, so for now, let's focus back on Doors. Even though Doors isn't really all that scary, I still highly recommend it if you just want a fun horror game to play with friends, as that's absolutely what this game is best for. Yeah, you could play Lethal Company or something along those lines, but that costs money. If you want a free, co-op horror game that's still fun, Doors is a great choice. At least the first floor is, I'm not sure about the other three. I didn't play those and therefore I have no opinion on them. However, the first floor still remains a fun experience. So again, I recommend it. We're starting off pretty strong here, so why don't we take a look at a game I did not enjoy, despite also being a pretty popular game. I did not care for Apeirophobia.
How can you even say that, Dad?
Didn't like it.
In my opinion, this is the perfect example of everything wrong with Roblox horror games, and what you should not do when making one. Now, I do want to give a little disclaimer. I only played the first 2 levels of this. Maybe it gets better after those first 2 levels, but considering what I've seen and heard of the rest of the game, I'm not so sure. I am sure, however, that I don't like this game. If you do, that's perfectly fine, but I really did not care for this game. Let's start with the setting, or rather, settings. This is a liminal space horror game, and while I do enjoy liminal spaces, and think they can be used to great effect in horror, this game is not a good example, and that's for one simple reason. This is a backrooms horror game. Now, for the uninitiated, liminal space and backrooms might be interchangeable, but let me explain. Liminal spaces are simply transitionary spaces that are empty, creating an unnerving effect. The backrooms, however, are a creepypasta taking that concept and adding a story to it. People have taken the backrooms concept and added onto it, sometimes to good effects, like with Kane Pixel's Backroom series, but often to not so good effects. Now, Apeirophobia does take direct inspiration from Kane Pixel's aforementioned series, but that series simply does not work in the format of this game. Let me tell you how this game plays. You're in a liminal space. There's a monster that, if it sees you, will hunt you down and inevitably kill you. The levels are maze-like, with only arrows to guide you, and the only thing differentiating where you are in the levels are some colored lights. Now you might notice that doesn't sound very fun, and it's not. I'm sorry, I really don't like being negative in my videos, especially when it comes to game design, because I know firsthand how difficult it is, but this game really is just boring. I played this game 3 different times, and on my first 2 attempts, I died almost immediately, and in my third, I didn't even see the monster on the first level. When I got to the second level, where you need to twist valves to progress, I couldn't even find half of the valves. I searched practically the entire map, and only managed to find 2 out of the 5 required to progress. So you know what I did? I gave up. Again, maybe this game gets better later, but from what I've seen and been told, pretty much every level of the game is like this. Apeirophobia is one of the most boring games I've played, both in and out of Roblox. Maybe I'm missing something here, and if I am, I will try this game again, but I don't know, I think this game just isn't for me. Apeirophobia is everything wrong with Roblox horror games. It's a boring maze with a scary ghoul you have to run from, and if the scary ghoul sees you, you have pretty much no chance of escape. When you die, it's either back to the start, or 40 Robux if you want to respawn. You can find countless games like this on Roblox, and most, if not all of them, are not worth your time. Case in point, the next game I want to talk about. Okay, that last sentence was a little misleading. I do think there are aspects of Baseplate Tycoon that are good. Starting off with the concept. I'm a sucker for games that hide their horror aspects until after you start playing, and I think the concept of a Roblox tycoon secretly being a horror game is very interesting. However, for as good as the concept is, the game itself isn't much to write home about. The tycoon aspect is boring, and the horror aspect of this game is just running around in a dark void to find the last button. I played this game 3 or 4 times and I never even found the button, and I didn't even see the monster chasing me. Now, in the game's defense, this is pretty much just a proof of concept. The game's creator, fellow YouTuber ByteBlocks, had never made a horror game before, and, as far as I'm aware, threw this game together in a pretty short amount of time. So, for that reason, I'll be a bit less harsh. I still don't really think the game is good, but there's no reason that it can't be improved later. Again, there's a really cool concept here, just a bit of a flawed execution. I hope one day Baseplate Tycoon has more to it, but until then, I think we should move on to the next game. Let's take a little break. and talk about an older Roblox horror game. One that doesn't rely on the same tired tropes a lot of these other games suffer from. Dead Silence was released in 2011, and as such, it feels very different compared to most Roblox horror games. This feels much more like an actual attempt at making a horror game, albeit one in the Roblox engine. The basic plot is that we're some sort of investigator or police officer, it's never made entirely clear, investigating the legend of Mary S. And no, it's never explained who that is. Editing Distraxx here, this is basically the plot of the movie Dead Silence, which I haven't seen, but I just wanted to say that before 1,000 people in the comments did. Make of this what you will, I don't know. We start out in a dark train tunnel, and after finding a scary pentagram room, we get hit by a train. After being shown a vision of a creepy house, we wake up in an abandoned facility, where the ghost of Mary S. now torments us. At least, I think so. We solve some basic puzzles, see some scripted scares, and the game ends with the game telling us to run, but not look back. However, reaching the door at the end of the hallway, it's locked, leaving us with no choice but to look back, ending the game. Now, the reason why I gave a bit more of a summary on this game's plot is because that's really all there is to this game. Seriously, this game lasts about 15 minutes, and as far as I'm aware, there's no secret endings, no hidden lore, or any extra content. I don't think this is a bad thing at all, and I actually found this to be somewhat of a charming experience. Honestly, Dead Silence reminded me a lot of haunted houses I've been to, as the scares present in the game both don't kill you and are heavily scripted. Also, the fact that it's just not really scary at all. Dead Silence is definitely dated, but I still enjoyed my time with it, even though it was very brief.
I am Sonic.exe. I was brought to life on an evil CD. Now I'm in your computer, and I will give you virus that will make you pooper.
Alright, I'm gonna try to keep this short, because I'm including this less for the game itself, and more for what it represents. On Roblox, there's a whole genre of horror game that I'll be dubbing midnight games. I'm not entirely sure where they come from, but as far as I'm aware, the first one was Midnight Market. These games all follow a formula of being a minimum wage worker just trying to get through their shift, while some creature or killer is trying to kill you. Similarly, Roblox is home to a lot of games using copyrighted characters, especially in the horror genre. I'll talk about another one of these later, but just as an example, let's take a look at Sonic, or more specifically, Sonic.exe. There are an absurd amount of Sonic.exe games on Roblox, and I can say, without a shadow of a doubt, most of them are bad. You know why I can say that? Because both these Sonic.exe games and these midnight games are made for one simple reason: to take your money. These games are slop in every sense of the word, and I'm going to use Midnight Sonic to show you just how sloppy these games can get. Immediately, and I mean immediately upon opening the game, I was greeted by a pop-up asking if I wanted to buy a rocket launcher for 450 Robux. That's about $5 US. And mind you, I just opened the game. I haven't even seen the scary Sonic yet. Now, getting into the game proper, we're shown a cutscene where our player character calls an arcade for a job. We're told to head over there, and the game properly begins. Before we can enter the building, a strange child warns me of a realistic blue hedgehog he saw nearby. It's probably nothing to worry about though, so I head inside and talk to the owner of the arcade. We're given the job immediately, and start that very same minute. We just have to serve the customers arcade tokens and food, and occasionally clean up trash and fix the power. Nothing of note happens on the first night, aside from this detective showing up, so we move on to night 2. When the power goes out on this night, a ghostly Sonic can be seen in the generator room, though nothing actually happens. I mean, I was hit by a jump scare, but I don't think that was supposed to happen. Later, we have to move some arcade cabinets, and one of the Sonic cabinets has blood on it, as well as a picture of Gulp Sonic.exe! The next night, we have to mop up some puddles, and are eventually greeted by the detective. I tell him about the strange happenings last night, and he agrees to stay after my shift, so we can figure out what's going on. At the end of the shift, we go to take out the trash and Sonic.exe is there! Yikes! After a very easy chase sequence, the detective knocks out Sonic with a door? I actually don't know what he knocked out Sonic with, and we go inside to call the owner. In the middle of the phone call, Sonic appears, and he says he's gonna kill us. We then have to escape to our car through a sewer. Because I'm stupid and went the wrong way, Sonic killed me. I decided to call it there, so I have no idea how much longer the game is, but I assume it's probably not too much longer. Now, I did refrain from talking about all of the issues in this game, like how boring it was, all the typos, all the nonsensical dialogue, and how many goddamn microtransactions there were. I mean, come on, they're fucking everywhere. And that's because they kind of go without saying. As I said earlier, this game is slop. Slop I found to be hilarious, for like 2 minutes at the end anyway, but slop nonetheless. I really just wanted to show you how bad these games can get, because this is unfortunately a very large part of Roblox horror games. These games are ultimately harmless, so long as you don't fall for their scummy microtransactions, but I'd highly recommend you spend your time elsewhere, such as in the next game I'll be talking about. For the next two games, I'd like to talk about some actually good games again. I know, it may come as a surprise that they exist, and that Cheese Escape is one of them, but they do exist. I'm going to try to keep this section brief, both because this is another more popular game, and it's a bit on the longer side. I played this game for 40 minutes, and I probably would have spent even longer on it had I not already played it beforehand. Now, before anything else, I want to get this out of the way. Cheese Escape is not scary. At best, it could be considered unnerving, but it's absolutely not scary. Cheese Escape feels more like a parody than an actual attempt at a horror game. But even so, it's a lot better than some of the actual horror games I've talked about, despite having similar gameplay. Yes, it does follow the typical Roblox horror game formula, that being you're in a maze, there's an enemy you need to avoid, in this case a giant rat.
I'm the giant rat that makes all of the rules.
Said enemy will instantly kill you, and most of the time, you have no chance of escaping from it. However, Cheese Escape is built around this. Unlike every other game I've talked about, which follows this format, you have infinite lives, as dying just sends you back to the spawn room. You don't lose any progress, just a bit of your time. In fact, there's actually a few cases where you want to die, just so you can get around faster. I'm getting ahead of myself though. What exactly do you do in this game? In short, you're in a cheese maze, being hunted by a giant rat. You need to collect 9 pieces of cheese, a la Slender the 8 Pages, in order to open up the exit and escape. To get these pieces of cheese, you have to get some keys, which can be found throughout the map, starting with the green key. With the green key, you can then get the red key, then the blue key, and then finally, get all 9 pieces of cheese. Upon entering the exit, you get a cutscene where the rat kills you, but upon reopening the game, you're given access to a new room with a white key. You can use this new white key to get the secret ending, which requires some more keys. Using the white key, you can get the yellow key, which you can then use to get a gray key, then finally a purple key. You then get a red cheese, which teleports you to a new area, followed by a boss fight. This boss fight is honestly complete bullshit. I tried to do it about 3 or 4 times by myself, and I didn't even come close to beating it. So, I'm just going to take some footage from YouTube of the secret ending, since I didn't want to ask my friends to hop on Cheese Escape at 1 in the morning. But that's about all there is to Cheese Escape. At least its first chapter, This is another game that has a bunch of newer content I haven't played, and in all honesty, I have no idea what even happens in the newer chapters. Maybe they're good, maybe they're not, but either way, I haven't played them. I probably will play them one day, but for now, I'm going to stop here. Cheese Escape is definitely a unique experience, and it's one I feel you wouldn't be able to find anywhere other than Roblox. Check it out, should you wish to. Before we move on to the last game, I'd like to do a short little lightning round, as there were a couple games I played that I wanted to talk about, though I don't have much to say about them. Let's start with another good one, that being Pressure. I very nearly included this as its own proper segment. However, this is basically just Doors. Take everything I said about Doors and how fun it was, double it, and you have Pressure. I played this one for almost an hour straight, and I wasn't even playing with friends. This game is really just that fun, and somehow, it's still got a great sense of spookiness. Don't get me wrong, Pressure isn't really scary. I mean, it's a comedy horror game after all, but it's definitely got some spooky vibes, so I think it still deserves a place here. Highly recommend this one. Next, let's talk about another one that nearly had its own segment, The Mimic. This is a Japanese-themed horror game, and while The Mimic does suffer from a lot of the same problems as games like Apeirophobia, for example, having a monster that's nearly impossible to escape, I enjoyed this one a bit more. I could see myself playing The Mimic again in the future, though I doubt I ever actually will. Next, I want to mention Silent Dark. I briefly mentioned it at the start, but Zeekers, Lethal Company's developer, used to be a Roblox game developer. I wanted to include one of the horror games he made, and I eventually decided on Silent Dark. As for the game itself, it's not bad, though I found it a bit slow and boring. While I was playing, it felt pretty clear to me that it was made by an inexperienced dev, though one that has a lot of talent. I do still think this game is worth checking out. Just be aware that the original version is now unplayable, so you'll have to play a remake. Finally, I have a very special game. Freaky Gojo. Ooh boy, this is, I'm not joking, the entire reason I made this video. Originally I was going to include this at the end as a little joke, but come on, how can I not put it here? This is a f***ing Jujutsu Kaisen horror game, and just putting aside how silly of a concept that is for a second, this is another slop game. It's nowhere near as bad as Midnight Sonic, but I'd hardly call it good. It's got extremely cliche analog horror cutscenes, complete with AI voices, a main threat that's based on a f***ing meme, repetitive gameplay, and of course, a lot of microtransactions. This is the full slot package, and it's beautiful. I'm incredibly biased because me and my friends have made jokes at this game's expense for months now, but this is, in my opinion, one of the goofiest Roblox horror games ever made. Freaky Gojo is slop, but it's my slop. You should still probably not play it, it's really not very good. Anyway, that's it for the lightning round. I have one last game I want to show you, so without further ado, let's talk about... Okay, so arguably this isn't a horror game. I honestly don't really know what this is, but I doubt I'll ever get the chance to talk about this game again, so I'm going to just talk about it anyway. VESZTESEG is one of the strangest Roblox games I've ever played, and I find it extremely fascinating. I'd best describe it as a surreal exploration game, most similar to something like Yume Nikki or LSD Dream Emulator, though I feel it's a lot creepier than those games. There's definitely some sort of message the game is trying to convey, one I'm pretty sure is about religion, but I can't really decipher what the message is. Maybe if I actually got all the game's endings I'd understand, but I'll get more into that in just a minute. First, let me tell you about how this game works. VESZTESEG is a game about rolling around this boulder, known as Jesus, and your primary goal is just to defeat all of the bosses in the game. I know, that doesn't really sound like a horror game, but stick with me here. There's a strong sense of loneliness and isolation present throughout the game, as you're pretty much alone in this walled-off wasteland, and there's no music present throughout the entire game. All you can do is roll around Jesus, and occasionally, fight an overly difficult boss. This brings me to the one thing I don't like about this game: the combat, or more specifically, the bosses. I don't think they're very well designed, and I feel bosses are a bit out of place in a game like this. I'm going to go over the first two bosses I fought. The first boss, a glass orb known as... I'm just gonna call it glass, isn't too bad. But the second boss, the Minotaur, is the complete opposite. I'll be honest, I did not beat this boss. It's almost impossible to actually hit him consistently, and it takes about 40 hits for him to actually go down. And that's not even mentioning how much damage he does, and how you have to go out of your way to find a somewhat hidden weapon to even damage him. Now, if you do manage to defeat him, you can get one of the game's many abstract endings. I'll go over the ending I actually obtained first, which is the bad ending. To get this one, all you have to do is defeat Glass, then escape the starting area. Roll Jesus into this temple, and onto this pentagram symbol. Once you do so, the sky will darken, as Jesus flashes white and red, and then flies up into the sky. Japanese text then appears on screen, though I'm not sure what it translates to. A little side note, supposedly, this temple you roll Jesus into is known as Jackal's Temple, with Jackal being Swedish for devil. The second main ending, the one I didn't obtain, is a bit more complicated. You need to go past Jackal's Temple, get this orb called Starter, and then defeat the Minotaur to access another temple. However, I've already shown how that's a bit easier said than done. You can get some upgrades at Jackal's Temple by doing some parkour and getting onto the roof, then talking to this orb called Omen, but those didn't help me much. Anyway, if you do manage to defeat the Minotaur, you can go into the second temple, press a button, which causes a crater to appear. Roll Jesus onto the star in the center of the crater, and watch as he flies up and causes more Japanese text to appear, which translates to, "You are still stupid." I'm not sure entirely what this means, but given VESZTESEG's religious theming, perhaps it's a commentary on religion. I don't know. What I do know is that despite this game's flaws, I did enjoy it. I've only scratched the surface with VESZTESEG, and I know I'll return someday to at least finish playing it, if not to cover it more in depth. It's by no means the best game in the world, and it's not even the best game I've talked about in this video, but it's the most interesting to me, and that's all that matters. In a sea of endless slop, VESZTESEG stands alone as a truly unique Roblox horror game experience. And with that, I've covered all the games I wanted to talk about. There are, of course, tons of Roblox horror games out there I didn't cover, but if I attempted to cover them all, this video would probably be 100 hours long, and nobody wants that. The games I covered may not all be good, or scary for that matter, but I at least found them all interesting. I'd much rather a game be bad than have it be boring, because then I at least have something to talk about. Roblox has a surprising amount of good horror games, and I didn't even cover all of them. Hell, there's probably some out there I don't even know about. But for every great game out there, there's a whole lot more that are just out to take your money. So please, be mindful of what you're playing. Don't waste your time playing some cash grab slop just because it's popular. Go out there and find some more obscure games that are actually worth your time. But anyway, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe out there, and good night.